Gentleman from Montana. Mr. Downing, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses here. As a former Commissioner of Securities, I had certain interactions with the former administration of the SEC, Gary Gensler, and when he would bring things down, such as rule promulgation on mandatory climate disclosures and some other things, I would reach out to him and say, my job as the Commissioner of Securities is to protect investors. Your job is to protect investors. Let's both stay in our lanes here. And that was a common refrain there. And another short story is I was also the Commissioner of Insurance. And I had a meeting with a reinsurance group, who I won't name here, talking about the risk that they were pulling out of. They were pulling out of oil and gas. They were pulling out of, they said, animal rights issues and some other things. And that kind of raised my interest. And I said, hey, I come from a state where we have more cows than people, and we plan on eating them. Is that going to be a problem? And their response was, we're not sure. And so fast forward a little bit, I had, under the condition of confidentiality, a reinsurance group come up to me telling me about their shareholders, their proxy votes. And they said, we are being pressured to take these positions on ESG issues that we do not believe are in the interest of our business. And that really caught my attention. So all of this stuff that I'm dealing with as a Commissioner of Securities and Insurance is coming from something that has another goal. And my theory there was that folks that didn't like certain industries, that didn't like oil and gas, didn't like agriculture, whatever it is they didn't like, couldn't shut it down from the front door, so they were trying to come from the back door and make sure you didn't have access to capital markets and make sure you didn't have access to insurance. And so I'm going to start here on proxy advisors. Thank you for bearing with me on that. Today we have a duopoly with ISS and Glass Lewis, making up 97% of the proxy advisory market. And often it seems like these firms care more about pushing a social and environmental agenda on public companies than doing what is best for their shareholders. In fact, proxy advisor firms have no legal obligation to act in the best interest of their shareholders despite having enormous sway. I'm going to start with Mr. Copeland. How does this lack of a fiduciary duty for proxy advisory firms impact the quality and the objectivity of their recommendations?
Well, I mean, it has to. There's really no check on them. They can say, to some degree, whatever they want. I mean, there's going to be anti-fraud repercussions they could face, et cetera. But it's not a clear fiduciary situation, right? I mean, they're contracted with other fiduciaries,
right?
So it's tricky, but it certainly affects the quality.
Yeah, it really is a shame that the previous administration focused on the needs of activists rather than the needs of everyday investors. And the SEC, under the previous leadership, essentially encouraged activists to force companies to consider and adopt policy changes that Joe Biden and the Democrats could not get through Congress. Thankfully, SEC Chair Paul Atkins has already rescinded some of these decisions that permitted the worst abuses of the shareholder proposal process. I'm going to move on to Mrs. Keel. In June, the D.C. District Court upheld the SEC's 2020 amendments to Rule 14a-8, which set eligibility requirements for submitting shareholder proposals and proxy statements. The court found that the SEC acted appropriately in updating the rules to increase ownership thresholds and support levels required for proposal resubmission. Do you think the SEC should consider raising the current submission and resubmission thresholds further?
I definitely do. From an ownership standpoint, I think it's important in a lot of areas of securities, we really try to align the people with influence with an economic interest and skin in the game. So we do that for directors, we do that for the kind of real activists, not the activists that we're talking about today. We do that for employees and executive officers. But here, we don't really have any economic alignment there to kind of safeguard against somebody, exploiting it with their own interests. On the resubmission thresholds, definitely, I think that when we ignore the majority of a shareholder's vote on something, it's really ignoring their voice. And so if we're talking about shareholder democracy, we really should respect what they have to say.
All right, thank you. And shifting gears a little bit, there's obviously costs in terms of time, resources, legal fees, and responding to engaging with shareholder proposals. Do you have any thoughts on whether these costs increased during the Biden administration and roughly by how much?
I don't have a dollar amount, but I would say that the cost is indirect, really, because it's been the the pressure on the companies to adopt these disclosure standards. And, one statistic I found, is that it would take, about $500,000 to do a kind of sustainability report each year.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from South Texas.